Welcome back to another edition of Revolution Recap, home of the leaders and big chances missed to start the 2020 season, as the New England Revolution have 7 big chances they have failed to convert on, tied with only the Seattle Sounders for first place in that interesting category, and coming off a 1-1 draw against the Chicago Fire at home, their first points of the season. Joining me today is Jake Catanese. Jake, the Revolution obviously creating a lot of chances. Jake, of course, from the Bet Musket. The Revolution creating a lot of chances to start the season, but have only completed 2 goals. Should Revolution fans be panicking by the poor finishing, or should they be, somewhat hopeful by the fact the Revolution have created so many chances, even though 2 games in they only got 1 point on the board?
This is not panicking. Do not call the work number trying to report robberies or panic or missing ankles for whatever Christian Pinilla did to that poor man from Chicago. No, that is not a proper use of my work number. All of you, stop it. Looking at you, Jeff Lemire.
Is the panic more for the dribble or the terrible pass that followed it from Christian Pinilla?
I know Jeff Lemieux had the tweet because I as usual have to respond of that is not a proper use of the work number as all things are. For those who don't know that I do answer 911 phone calls for a living. That seems to sum up the Revolution kind of in a nutshell, where it's like we can get to that great moment and then 2 seconds later we find a way to balls it all up.
The amount of chances that were missed in this match, starting in just the 8th or 9th minute when that Diego Fagundes got the ball right in front of goal and sent it miles high of the net. I think Pinilla had a great chance in the second half that he blew. Buxa scored a fantastic goal that, I would say was not one of the easiest chances of the night by any stretch. But, you had that missed chance for Pinilla, the missed chance for Fagundes, and then at the very end of the game, Justin Rennicks was got to be the easiest chance of his Revolution career so far in his limited minutes, and might be the easiest chance he gets all season, from a yard out from goal, with probably easier to put it on frame than off frame. Somehow managed to send it high of the net. Disappointing result for the Revolution. What do you take away from a game like this for the Revs, in which they did a lot of things right, but also kind of gave up a sloppy goal and did concede a few chances and ended up with a 1-1 draw in a game that they probably feel like they should have left with 3 points?
I think I feel the same that we did in Montreal, when we leave with no points. It's this is without Carlos Gil, it's really, really hard to judge where this team is, because they are doing a lot of things right. And it just seems like we're just lacking something in the final third. And sometimes that's finishing, sometimes it's the final ball, sometimes it's a little bit of both. This seems to be more of a finishing problem. With respect to Tajon Buchanan, Justin Rennicks, who I love the fact that they're coming in off the bench late in games and they're getting runouts and they get to cause problems and do fun things. Yes, we prefer our shots to be on target. We don't prefer to have our sitters end up in row Z. However, for young players who did not get a lot of playing time last year, or in non-USL games, at least they're in the right spot to put the sitter in row Z, as opposed to those types of chances just being like, why is no one at that back post? Why is no one covering over to here? Why is no one getting to this spot? At least I can say we're in the right spot, because if you're in the right spot, 9 times out of 10, good things are going to happen. We keep rolling the natural 1 on the proverbial Dungeons & Dragons D20, but we can work through that and buy new dice and figure out, okay, once we start getting things on target, once we start creating – the chance creation problem is not going away. We've had this problem for several years. This is not a new problem. At some point, those types of chances even out. You start putting together chances that don't deserve to go in, and they turn into little magical wonders. That fairly harmless cross into Buxa at the top of the 18, that probably should have been defended, and somehow Buxa one-touches it around a statue of a defender, right, and then slots it into the post. That probably is not the goal the Revolution deserved that day, but it was pretty darn cool.
Yeah, and you talk about the Rennicks chance. I just want to go back to that one quickly. Last weekend, it was Buchanan who had the great chance that could have gotten the Revolution a point. And if you're being generous to Buchanan, he should have put that away, but I don't think Buchanan's a guy you count on to be coming in at the far post and heading a ball on frame. I don't think that's his forte. But when you talk about a guy like Justin Rennicks, yeah, he's young. Yes, he hasn't gotten that many minutes, but this is a guy that has played most of his career as a forward or a striker. You expect that to kind of be his bread and butter. Is it too harsh to say that even a guy that is young and hasn't had a lot of minutes has to put that on frame?
I think at least yes, it has to be on frame. Listen, if it's not on frame, you can't score, and that's what it boils down to. I'd rather be getting shots on frame and maybe making the goalkeeper do less work and making the goalkeeper have more of a routine save because you hit it right at him, than to be trying to touch everything into the side netting or finding the perfect angle or whatever it is. Just get the ball on net. Make the goalkeeper do something to earn that save, because a lot of times if you make him earn the first save, he's not in a position to get to the second one, because usually he's spilled it or he's put it back into play. And I think right now that's something that New England hasn't really been doing. It seems like a lot of our first chances are the only chances. There's not a lot of cleanup shots. If you're not scoring pretty ridiculous goals like Bunbury and Buxka, there's not a whole lot of second chances, not a lot of easy goals. And New England just needs a couple of those right now. And based on some of the chances they have been getting, a couple of these need to be just slotted into the, goal. These are not shots that look like they're that hard, and it seems like the New England strikers are in the box are just making it look harder than it is right now.
So the one guy that did seem to have a good shooting night was Buxa, which is what the Revolution expect from their DP striker. He finished the night with 3 shots, 2 on target. He scored that nice goal. He had another shot blocked on the line. He had 2 chances created, 5 ball recoveries, 4 aerial duels, 1. Did have 3 times he was dispossessed, and his passing was just 11 for 16. But overall, I thought it was a very promising performance from Buxa. I think there was some people that were a bit negative on his debut performance the week before, but in this game, I think he gave the Revolution what they want from him, which is a great target in the box and a guy that's putting away chances when he gets them. What did you think of his performance, and do you think it was more promising than what we saw against Montreal?
Yeah, no, I think Buxton had a lot more support than he did in Montreal. Montreal looked like he was stranded a lot. I think New England is definitely going to benefit a lot more from having Hill back with Buxa, because then you have an actual creator in the middle of the field, because I do not want Gustavo Bo operating as a number 10. I love you, Gustavo. You are not a 10. You are an off striker. I need you higher up on the field. Stop roaming around everywhere. You wear number 7, but you are some kind of a striker. You are not a number 7 partner or midfielder type. Despite the fact that Bo continues to create chances from all over the field. I have no idea how he does it. Set pieces and everything else. But no, we need Carlos Gil back in the middle of the field. That's going to free up Bo to get balls in better places. That's going to free up Busca get balls in better places. I think the wingers are going to see better distribution. That includes Christian Pania, who just, I think in particular right now is suffering the most. We can't get him going because I feel like the service just is not getting out wide in dangerous areas. I feel like Pania in particular is getting the ball not enough in the final third. He's getting it always before the 18, 20, 30 yards away from goal on the wing. That's just not going to get it done for New England. They need to get the ball in the final third a lot more. They need to really, get close to the end line, penetrate, use the crosses. The crosses are beautiful. The crossing is not the issue. Normally it has been. Get Busca, get Bo, get, Gil following up at the top of the box. Get more people involved in the box rather than just sort of, have one person crashing in on goal. You need 2, you need 3. Make the defense, really earn, that first, second, third chance type opportunities, and you'll start seeing New England convert a lot of these chances. They're playing for the most part relatively well. It's just in the final, just right before the final third, it just seems to be sort of falling apart just a little bit, and I think Hill's going to be one of the big reasons why that'll solve itself.
Yeah, and you talk about the crossing. It's been a lot better from Brandon Bai. I think it's been good from Gustavo Bo. Jones on occasion has put in a few nice crosses. But where it hasn't been great, at least in this game, was from Pania, who you talked about, who was 0 for 4 on crosses, and from Teal Bunbury, who was 0 for 1 on crosses. And I didn't think Pania had a very good game. I don't think you thought Pania had a very good game based on your comments. But after the first game, there was some talk about kind of playing Pania and Bunbury as inverted wingers, which is what we saw in the first game, what we saw again in this game. Does that make sense to you, where Pania is a guy who can cross with his left foot, Bunbury is a guy who's not a great crosser, period, but obviously better with his right foot than his left foot? Do you start to see that as a problem a little bit to have those two guys if they're not getting in positions to kind of cut inside and take shots, and they're not guys that are going to be kind of going to the end line to try to cross with their weaker foot?
Mhm.
What is your take on those guys kind of playing on their weaker foot side and being sort of more inverted wingers in these first two games?
I think the problem right now is that the Revolution formation lacks balance. It lacks balance because Bo is not a normal number 10, and he's not getting himself into positions to support his wingers, and then vice versa. We saw this, I think, mostly in the Montreal game. It was a little bit better against Chicago. Panini and Bunbury as wingers don't necessarily bother me. What bothers me is when Bo is dropping back far too deep in the midfield. Now your wingers are dropping back to get the ball at not advanced positions. This is why Bo needs to push himself higher up on the field. This is why I was always like, why is Carlos Gil, first half of last year, always in his defensive third getting the ball back? That's bad. You need to have the distribution going forward. One of the things that I loved about Diego Fagundes in Montreal was he was basically he out Scotty Caldwell, passing, recycling the ball left, right. It was perfect. The problem was that it was always at the midfield stripe. When the Revolution are doing really, really well, that recycling of the ball is happening at like the top of the circle, 40, 50 yards away from goal, not 60 or 70. And I feel like that's just where New England is right now. It's just instead of getting all of the killer passes into the 18, they're getting all the killer passes before the 18 and having to settle on longer, not as great big shots. The chances they do get inside the box, we're putting 50 yards above the goal. So it's one of those things where I think Gil balances out two problems. One, you get a true creator in the middle of the field and someone who can maneuver the ball where it needs to go and then continue to support the attack. The Revs attack right now seems far too direct. The wingers are having to come into the middle of the field to fill the space that Bo is leaving, instead of Gil or Bo or Buska dropping into that space and then people moving up forward to replace that space. I think right now you're just seeing a little bit of a static movement of the ball gets to the defensive midfielders, the ball gets to the wingers and to the attacking midfielder, and then that's sort of where it dies, instead of the ball being balanced between the lines and moving back and forth. The Revs are not really a possession team. They're going to be more of a countering style team. They're going to want to move the ball through those lines quickly. But when you're not supporting those lines and when you're not filling spaces properly, this is the kind of attack that it seems. Your attack seems very narrow, in my opinion. You're not getting your wingers involved in the game in the spots farther up the field where they need to. And Bo, who I again will say is still not a number 10. He's doing as well as he can, creating chances and set pieces and everything else. It seems like it's just a smidge off on a lot of different little things, and that leads to the God. If we just finished one of those big chances, we'd have 4 points instead of we've missed all these big chances. We have 1 point total. So.
Yeah, no, and I think you make a great point too about Fagundes and the role he's played, and I think that's kind of the problem in the first two games is you do see him at midfield making those good passes to move the ball from left to right, but it's happening so far back that you almost wonder if the Revolution were pushing forward and had more possession, I think his play might look a lot better than it's looked in these first two games.
I am really intrigued based on particularly Fagundes' first game. If you go to a 4-1-4-1. And I'm going to sort of say this is kind of a weird Fubarish formation. You're going to have some weird combination of you've only got one holding midfielder, and I want some combination of maybe Diego and Gil in the middle. And then you just sort of stagger your center midfield, and you figure out a way of what wing are we going to put Gustavo Bo on, or what strike pairing, or we can even go 4-4-2 and just have two strikers and just let Bo roam around as if he's kind of a winger. For me, I would drop Pania when Gil comes back, and I would try to push Bo out to one of those either straight up next to Buska, go 4-4-2, or put him out wide and have Bunbury on the other side. And then you can sort of mess with Pania and bring him in late, or figure out a way how to balance it out at the end of games when you're trying to close something out. Maybe you want Buchanan to run people off into the ground instead of Pania. Things like that you can do when you have a full-strength lineup because you've already got Diego on the field. Now you can drop him, put in Scotty Caldwell, and now you still have that passing matrix. But Scotty, you don't need to do that stuff 40 yards away from goal. You can have Scotty at midfield recycling the ball left to right. I think New England is very close right now. Hill's a big piece of the party, big piece of the puzzle, I should say, tactics-wise. the fullbacks, I'm telling you, I think the crossing from the fullbacks and the support the fullbacks are doing this year is great. As the wingers sort of sort themselves out and get situated when the spacing is all proper, it's only going to get more effective because their influence will be a lot better. Right now, I think they're sort of struggling to figure out what the wingers in front of them are doing and trying to find the spaces naturally for them as well. But like I said, it just seems off right now. There's something not right, and New England isn't adjusting to Gil not being there in particular, and that to me is something. If it's going to be a long-term thing with Hill, which it's not, it doesn't seem like it's going to be. I just think Bruce is there's just a little adjustment or a little tactical thing that's just not sticking right now, and that right now is the difference between the Revs being good start to the year versus kind of, well, maybe we're still a little bit more work in progress than we hope to be.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree with that. And if Heel's not out on the field and you don't have that guy that you can play the ball to and know he's going to create a chance from, I do wonder if it makes sense to start Diego in that role. Or do you think if Luis Caicedo was out? I mean, to me, if Luis Caicedo was available, given Heel's not out and given the style the Revolution are trying to play, they'd be better off with him than Fagundes at the moment for that role.
Yeah, I think there's something where if it were me, I would be playing more of a 4-4-2 or a 4-4-1-1 where it's like, if you want to have Bo roaming around and doing his thing, that's perfectly fine. But you can't have him as a number 10. You really need to keep him as a striker. You need to tell him, you are a striker. We really need you in the attacking third. We don't need you coming back 70, 80 yards away from goal and helping out nearly as much as he has been. Not that I don't love that stuff. I do. I love it when Hill does that stuff. But that's not what helps out the Revs and them be effective in the attacking phase. The Revolution are a team. We want to get out. We want to counter a little bit. We're never going to be a big possession-based team. But we just can't have Gustavo Bo picking up recoveries and things like that on the other half of the field. We need him doing that stuff on the attacking half and then turning around and being like, where's one of my wingers? Where's my outlet pass? Where's Buxo? We can advance the ball, and then he can give it back to me, and we've gained 20 yards of territory. Those are the types of little productive, attacking things that I think the Revs are missing right now. Everything's very direct. Everything's waiting for players to come into support because it just seems the formation is just sort of stretched. There's an imbalance in the formation. There's not enough, the spacing seems off. The positions seem off. Most of that, I think, is Bo trying to be a number 10, which is perfectly fine. He's not bad at a number 10. I just think positional wise, the Revs are just out of sorts. Adjusting to where he wants the ball or where he normally is. And I think a lot of times the ball just everyone seems a little bit more back to goal, far more far away from where the goal should be. It's not really helpful if, Bo's got his back to goal at midfield with the ball. Well, he's your attacking mid. You need him going towards goal. And I think that's the biggest difference between him and Heel is that Heel's going to be able to advance the ball in the dribble in tight spaces a lot more than Bo can.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think Bo hasn't had the impact in that kind of number 10 role that Heel can have. That's been a key problem for the Revolution. I think he's done a decent enough job there, doing what was asked of him, but he's just not the same player. But on that note, I wanted to talk about the defense quickly, and my takeaway revolves around the defense, and that's simply if the Revolution are a team that's going to cede 56, 60% of the possession to teams like this, they're not going to be a team that has a defense that's good enough to hold on to a shutout for 90 minutes when they're ceding that kind of possession. And I think what we've seen from Kessler has been very promising. I thought he had another good game. I thought even him going forward late in the game and his awareness of where to be and the pass that he made out wide to Brandon By on that Rennick's chance was phenomenal and a great sign for a rookie like him. And I think the defense was decent in this match. With that said, I do think that the goal that they conceded was preventable. I thought Christian Pania should have done a better job to close out. I forget who it was on the wing there that tracked down that ball that looked like it was going out of bounds, and Pania slowly jogged back to cover. Brandon By on that cross misread the cross. He was in a position where he could have backtracked a little bit to win that header, but he kind of didn't really move, was kind of caught flat-footed, and then went for the header and missed it. And then Andrew Farrell let Jonathan Bornstein kind of sneak in there and was a little bit lazy and lacked effort in trying to track him and impede his progress. So overall, defensively, I thought the Revolution had an okay game, but there's always going to be those moments for the Revs, especially now when they're starting Kessler back there and they're still kind of learning each other's habits and learning to play that way. So my takeaway is the defense just isn't good enough yet to hold on to a shutout if the Revolution are going to be ceding so much possession and not really controlling the play. And again, it just goes back to the disappointment of missing all those big chances. This team just needs to finish those chances if they're going to get 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the, in particular, just the number of clearances that the Revolution defense made. 25 of them is a lot, and I understand that. I don't have a problem with Kessler bombing the ball out, in particular. But that's a young defense. To explain what this defense is, it's a rookie center back, a veteran right back playing center back, a converted winger playing right back, and who's a 3-year player, and another converted winger playing left back who's a 2-year player. That is not a lot of experience and 0 natural players at their defense positions besides a rookie. We can debate whether or not Andrew Farrell at this point is a center back, but let's be fair here. That's sort of, 2 pretty decent center defenders and 2 offensive-minded converted wingers with about a combined, 12 years of MLS experience, and 8 of that is Farrell's. So I think the defense has been fine. In particular, I don't remember what minute the save was. I remember it was late because it was still, I think, 1-1. That was a huge save by Brad Knighton late in the game to keep that. I think 1-1.
Yeah, it was 4 minutes after they gave up the equalizer.
Yep. And then I think Kronholm had a save as well in the second half. But when you look at the stats, there's 2 stats that we care about. Number of clearances, the Revs had a lot more. Possession wise, we know the Revs are going to lose on that number. But when you have 15 shots on goal and you only made the goalkeeper save the ball twice and pick it out of his net once, that's a pretty solid problem right there that you've got. And you just did not make the other team work more than you did. If the other team has the ball 50-60% of the time, but you're putting half of your shots on target and you're making the other goalkeeper work a lot harder than yours, you're going to come out with results. And quite frankly, the first 2 games of the year, New England can't say that they've done that.
Right. For as good as the Revolution were, they ended the game with 4 shots on target to 6 for the Fire, and of course the Revolution had a couple of good shots, Buchs in particular, that were blocked. But with that said, they didn't convert the chances they did have into saves, or to even forcing saves or shots on frame, which is a problem. But talking about the defense, you mentioned a couple things that I wanted to touch on. One of which leads me to a listener question from Revolution Report that asks, "Can Kessler keep Tony out of the lineup when Tony's healthy again?"
Right now, I would argue yes, he certainly can. There's nothing that Kessler's doing that's wrong. Arguably, what the idea would be is, hey, can you start Farrell and Kessler can you start DeLume and Kessler in the middle, and can you start Farrell at right back? Is that something that Bruce wants to do? Or does Bruce say, no, Andrew Farrell's my number 1 center back. I'm sticking with Bai and Jones in some capacity at just fullback. If you end up with Farrell at right back and Butner at left back, do you decide to keep both Bai and Jones on the bench? Do you send one of them to Revs 2? There are a lot of questions the Revolution can answer when everyone is healthy. And I think Kessler staying in the lineup certainly would be one of them. If he's not going to be in the starting lineup, you want Mancienne on the bench, that's fine. You can absolutely give him minutes at Revs 2. But the fact that he's already got 180 minutes in MLS, and I think he's looked pretty darn good doing it, I don't see necessarily a reason to drop him. But it also wouldn't be a bad thing to say, you know what? We have this. We're going to try this lineup this week, and if that clicks, we can get the younger guys minutes elsewhere in the USL setup.
Yeah, and I've talked about this a lot before, and that my thought process is I think Farrell is still one of the Revolution's best center backs, and I expect him to stay there. But when you look at Farrell and Tony DeLume, and I apologize if I sound like a broken record because I know I've mentioned this on past shows, the two of them both have kind of the same weakness. Both of them struggle with balls over the top. Both of them struggle with crosses. And they may be your 2 best center backs. I'm not sure that's the case anymore with how Kessler's playing. But I don't think they make a very complementary pairing back there.
No.
They've done an adequate job in the past, but Kessler, in this game in particular, I thought Kessler did a much better job of winning the aerial duels. I didn't think he did a great job of it in the first game. In this game, I thought he did a lot better with that. And if Kessler can use his body and his size to become a dominant presence in the air, then I think he has to be the guy that's out there starting, whether that's next to DeLume or whether that's next to Farrell. I think it's going to be next to Farrell. But DeLume, obviously, a talented center back, he does have injury issues. Matthews, and I think he is a guy that you can't count on to play 90 minutes every week. So maybe you use him more as a rotational guy going forward.
Yeah.
But to me, yeah, I think Kessler can keep Tony out of the lineup, and I think if Kessler or if Tony gets healthy, there's maybe more of a chance that he ends up beating out Farrell, and that's not necessarily because Farrell's been playing poorly or more poorly than Kessler. I just think the matchup of Farrell and De La Mea is not an ideal center back pairing given their relative strengths and weaknesses.
No, and I think the biggest strength that Tony has in particular is Tony is by far the best passer on that back line, particularly on the center back spot. That's a big thing. When you have a team that's bad at possession, having a center back who is very calm out of the back really, really helps. And I think that's sometimes where the Revs miss Tony the most. Yes, we do need a big ball target clearing, cross destroying center back next to Tony. If Kessler's that guy, that's a solid pairing. You're right. When you look at the two resumes, very complementary. There's a reason why Jose Gonzalez and AJ Soares just worked really, really well. It was a very well-balanced lineup that the Revs had 6 years ago. And what I love about Kessler is for, I think, that entirety of those 6 years, I at least have been screaming, get a center back in the first round of the MLS Super Draft, not a converted fullback, a center back. Hallelujah. Bruce Arena comes in and answers my prayers after 6 years. And lo and behold, it's like, hey, look, we found a guy who's pretty darn good at it. So, like I said, Kessler's fine. If Kessler's not starting by the end of the year, I assume he'll be a starter next year at the rate he's going. Figure out what the Revs want to do with the international spots and the big contracts they've got back there. But I don't think Kessler's under any pressure right now. He's doing fine. He's doing exactly what he's there to do. He's pushing the guys in front of him. If he loses his spot, it's not because he's done anything wrong. It's because there's a certain expectation of, hey, we've got these guys in big contracts. They're making a lot of money. We kind of started to play them and see if you're better than them, you're going to be playing. Don't worry.
We wanted to talk about one more position on the back line. You mentioned when you were talking about the Revolution back line kind of how young it was and how many guys are playing out of position and still kind of learning the full back spots. One guy that wasn't in the 18 this week but also was not in the injury report was Seth Sinovic. Now, we know that Butner is out injured, but Sinovic has been off the injury report. Were you surprised that he wasn't even in the 18? And if he's not making the 18 or kind of competing for that left back role with Butner out, what really is the role of having a veteran left back that even in a situation where you're hurting for depth at fullback isn't in the 18?
Yeah, that was very interesting to me because it would shock me that to see Sinovic get a run out at right back as well if he's fully healthy. I know that we've got more people who can play that spot, and you're really looking at Sinovic to maybe be one of the more left back spots. But looking at the Revolution bench, the only defender they had on the bench was Mancien, and we already know how I feel about Mancien getting thrown into a game late. But that was your only defender. So ideally, if you needed to take a defender off, it would have been Mancien going into the middle and then Andrew Farrell going to whatever the fullback spot was. And that's really not the kind of defensive lineup you want to be seeing late in a game because it didn't work last week. I'm honestly confused as to why Damian Rivera is on the bench. I expect Damian Rivera to almost exclusively be playing this year at the USL2 setup, which is perfectly fine. That's where I want him. You've already got Kellen Rowe, Scotty Caldwell, Renix Buchanan. I don't know where Damian Rivera beats out someone off the bench out of those four people. So really that seems like that's an odd choice to have on the bench. I would rather have the utility defender in Sinovic, particularly utility fullback in Sinovic out there. The Revolution, I think, obviously wanted Sinovic. They wanted a veteran presence back there. It's, I assume, very similar reason why they went out and got Edgar Castillo, who again, the beginning of last year was arguably the best player for the Revs in March, the beginning of 2019. So, that one was a little bit strange. Only using two subs and not throwing someone else on there, maybe a Kellen Rowe, just for fun towards the end, just to cause a little bit of trouble for the final 10 minutes. But the Revolution, like I said, it's just the passing numbers have been just very, very mediocre. Overall, I think Montreal, they did a lot better with at least putting shots on target and trying to convert some of those chances, but the passing numbers are just dreadful, and the passing numbers in the final third are even worse. And I think when you have players like Kellen Rowe and Scotty Caldwell, and you are struggling to generate possession, at least, those are players you would expect to see a lot more of, even late in games, to try and settle things down and get you over the top.
Yeah, agreed. And when you talk about a Kellen Rowe, we mentioned Luis Caicedo being out the first two games, and we kind of saw the lineup last week where it started with Caldwell and Fagundes as the center mids, and then this game where they only used two subs. Again, I kind of wonder what is Kellen Rowe doing on the roster if he can't get into a game like this.
Yeah, and Kellen Rowe's like we sort of joke about it. I'm like, Kellen Rowe could have played fullback yesterday. It would not have been the craziest thing that's ever done. Hey, let's put Kellen Rowe at left or right back and just let him go cause trouble for the final 15 minutes. There's a lot of things that Bruce Arena has at his disposal. And I think the healthier the Revolution get, you see more of those options. Now you're looking at, well, maybe Bunbury's coming off the bench more and he's your closer. He's out there to shut down one wing and just use his engine to I'm taking away this section of the midfield, go somewhere else. Maybe you look at someone like Kellen Rowe, you can put him at the 6, you can put him out wide, you can put him in the middle. Like there's any number of positions you can put Kellen Rowe in. Pretty much everything but center back, I think, is the running joke from 2 years ago. And I just, there's just it seems like New England just should be able to just out tinker other teams. Whether that's in the starting lineup, whether it's the middle of the game, just the number of things that the New England Revolution can move around on the proverbial chalkboard and the tactics board. They should be able to create mismatches somewhere on the field. And I just think right now it's that chalkboard, those adjustments are just static right now. They're just either not working or they're just not happening. I haven't quite figured out which one yet.
Let's talk about the tinkering for a minute. We talked about, last week Bruce Arena after the game essentially said Montreal outplayed them or was the better team in the game. But there were only two changes in this game, one of which was, Knighton going in for Turner because Turner was hurt.
Right.
And the other one, which was Zahibo for Caldwell, which I think based on what we saw in the last game made a lot of sense. What do you think of Zahibo's performance? And were you surprised that we didn't see maybe one or two more changes based on what we had seen the prior week?
I think defensively everything seemed okay to me. So I wouldn't see there was a reason, unless someone was healthy and going into the lineup, I didn't see a reason to change anything defensively. Obviously Wilfred Zahibo had a pretty big impact in Montreal, so getting him into the lineup seemed fine. I think what disappointed me was that really only Zahibo changed, and I think it made Diego Fagundes a little bit worse. As far as he had a very, very clear and defined role in Montreal, and he stole that from Scotty Caldwell. In this game, he in particular was another one where I'm like, I'm not really sure where he was playing, and I'm not sure if that was because Zahibo also kind of sort of goes everywhere, or if the two of them were just kind of sort of interchangeable. It just seemed like they in particular those two just lacked a little bit of set. This is what we're doing. And I think, to me, that's the part of the game plan that might fall on Bruce is you have these two guys, you want them to play holding mid, but really Diego should be getting forward. It should have been Scotty Caldwell sitting back last week, and it should have been Zahibo sitting back this week, and Diego being that more forward player. And instead, it seemed like last week, Diego just sat back and recycled the ball around, which is what you want Caldwell doing. This week, I don't know who was supposed to be going forward, Diego or Zahibo. And that seemed another one of those off-balance issues with the team. When your holding midfield isn't set up very well, it affects the midfielders in front of them, and then that line is a little bit weird. And then we can't get support into the final third because the strikers and the wingers are all out of sorts. It's just sort of another one of those little wrinkles where it's like instead of settling it down and fixing it at halftime or addressing it, it just something about it just seemed off, and it seemed off the entire game, and it just didn't change. Not that it was bad, not that it was ineffective. It could have been better. And there's a lot of those types of things that I think the Revolution need to work on right now. Some of that was Heel coming back. Some of it is just recognizing it and knowing, hey, we need to do this, then this, instead of just sort of playing soccer.
Yeah, and you mentioned in-game changes. The one thing I was surprised we never really saw is Pania and Bunbury switch wings, because I don't think either of them, at least late in the game, I don't think either of them was having that much success. And we saw both of them come off as subs, but neither of them they never really switched wings. And we know both those guys, as they talked about, were kind of playing as inverted wingers. You'd think that would be something to kind of give a different look to the other team and the other defense, but that was something we haven't really seen much at all in the first two games.
Someone, I will not be able to find out who, but someone had that exact same thought where it's like, hey, Teal Bunbury's having a problem on this side. Maybe if you try and put your pace on that side of the wing against the Chicago backline, maybe that adjustment would work. I think it was Teal Bunbury mostly going up against Brant Branico on the right back side for Chicago. That seemed like that was a very fun
Yeah.
matchup in the first half, but that's also very much like, two square pegs going at it. You put Pania, the, speedy round peg around there, maybe that changes things. And then you have, Bunbury on the other side. So that's something that I think the Revs should just be doing just naturally, just like every 20 or 30 minutes, just sort of messing with that.
Right.
Again, something that's, again, a very static, no, this is our lineup, this is what we're going to do. And that should not be what the Revs are. The Revs should be, I think, a lot more proactive in that regard, whether that's coming from Bruce, whether that's coming from the players on the field. Just because they should be able to recognize, like, hey, us both going forward isn't really working. Let's switch sides. Let's have you stay back. Let's have, Diego stay back and be the decoy or the recovery man. Things like that. I just think there's just, something's just a little off. Whether it's communication, whether it's adjustments. I don't think the Revolution are playing badly. They also aren't necessarily playing very well all the time. And I think I'd rather see, a little bit of improvements across the board will lead to far more good things we've already seen.
Yeah, and before we get to listener questions, that there was one more change in the lineup that I always wanted to touch on quickly because we haven't mentioned him was Brad Knighton going in for Matt Turner, obviously forced for Turner's injury. But I thought Knighton had a very good game. You talked about that save in the 74th minute that kept the Revolution from falling behind. Really smart positioning. Excellent performance from Brad Knighton after what was a performance from Turner the week before that certainly had a few question marks and a few low points. What do you think of Brad Knighton's performance, and are you concerned at all that Turner missed this game, wasn't part of the 18 listed as questionable on the injury report, I believe? But any concern there, and what were your thoughts on Knighton?
No, I mean Matt Turner's the starter just based on last year, and unless his form goes considerably into the tank, Brad Knighton is Brad Knighton. Like there's a reason he's one of the best, I'd arguably say best number 2 goalkeepers in MLS. He's not going to go out there and lose you games. And as a number 2 goalkeeper, that's exactly what you want. He came up with a couple of big moments. He kept the Revolution in the game late after giving up the equalizer, which was not his fault. That's just what you want from him. Is the distribution always going to be great? No, not really. That's not what he's back there for. Is the positioning and the saves, the shot stopping going to be right up there with any backup in the league? Absolutely. That's why he's there. You're not worried about him trying to we want him to be passing and things like that. Like, no, get the ball out there, stop the ball. That's all we want you to do. He's been doing that for a long time. That's not going to change, at least for a couple more years.
And I do want to jump into listener questions now. A couple of them related to the subs, which was Tajon Buchanan and Justin Rennicks coming in for Pania and Bunbury around the 78th, 79th minute. The only subs the Revolution made in the game, kind of coming late. Mike Kennedy asked, should Buchanan start, or is he better as a spark plug off the bench?
I like him as a spark plug off the bench. Quite frankly, in particular, I thought the sub for Pania was warranted. It was probably warranted 10 minutes earlier. Right as
Agreed.
Chicago scored in the 70th minute, not 10 minutes later. Same thing with Rennicks. I don't love taking off Bunbury against Montreal. I don't love taking off Bunbury really ever. But at some point it's like, hey, Teal probably runs a heck of a lot more than everyone else on the field combined, so it makes sense to try and save him if it's only for 10 or 15 minutes. No, I mean, I think at some point, if Christian Pania is going to be kind of this bland and ineffective largely when Heel comes back, I would expect Pania to be relegated to the bench and Pania to be that spark plug. And then that sort of leaves Buchanan and Rennicks fighting for maybe there's only one spot off the bench now because Pania has one of them. So again, I like the fact that both of those guys, we know that they missed those chances. We might call them sitters. A sitter is not a goal. A sitter is a shot you need to put on target. There's a huge difference. The goalkeeper's allowed to get in the way still. I know both those guys have missed sitters. I know they want to put all their shots on target. The fact they're getting minutes, they're getting the right spots. Goals are going to happen if you do those things, and that's just sort of a microcosm again of the Revs are doing most things right. Just when we get to the final third, there's a little few hiccups like that. They're not the only ones that are doing it. I'm very happy that they're getting minutes. If they're not going to get more minutes than the paltry 10 or 15 that they're getting, I hope they start getting a ton of minutes down at USL and start killing it down there so that Bruce has to go and look and be like, I kind of probably should be putting Rennicks out there more, shouldn't I? Or maybe I actually put Buchanan in. Maybe he does get a couple of starts later on in the year. Things like that. I think besides the Open Cup type matchups, I think you'll see more of Buchanan and Rennicks this year at MLS, but they'll probably also get 1,000 minutes or so at USL too.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And to be honest, going into the season, I thought it would be Bunbury that would move to the bench for
Mhm.
for Carles Heel when Carles Heel was healthy. But after these first two games with how
No,
Panilla's performed, I changed my mind on that one. I think it's
yeah,
going to be
no,
Panilla.
it really needs to be Pania. And I want to stress the biggest thing right now, and we saw it last year. Please, for the love of all um, that is holy and Taylor Twellman and everything else, do not, under any circumstances, continue to put Gustavo Bo as a number 10. That is Carlos Gil's spot. Anyone who, if you want to put someone next to Carlos Gil as a number 8, that's perfectly fine. Gustavo Bo plays either two positions. He either plays next to the number 9 or he plays as a winger. There are no other options. If you're going to stick to the 4-2-3-1, Bo is out wide and Panilla and Bunbury are with him on the opposite wing. Let them switch as often as they want. I don't care if it's every 5 minutes because Bo gets bored. Let him do it. And I don't think Panilla will. I don't think Bunbury in particular will care about that because he's on the field. He's going to run around. He's going to do his thing. You need Carlos Gil in the middle of that field. You need him getting the support from either a partner or the two holding mids behind him, and let him distribute and let him figure out the direction of the attack. And that includes getting Bo farther up in the field instead of Bo dropping back and trying to be the creator, because that's not where we want. It's not where we want Gustavo Bo. He's been great. The set piece chances. I'm so happy the Revs might be a set piece threat, because that is something where we have been so horrendous at set pieces and crossing. I don't even care that first goal was a short quarter. Hashtag no short corners, kids. That was a good short corner routine, and I'm not allowed to say that legally because there's a law against that. But yeah, that's the biggest thing right now. When we get Carlos Gil back in the lineup, I think it'll be for Christian Panilla, and that's a very very odd thing to say going into the beginning of the year.
No, and you make a great point about the set pieces. The Revolution have been really, really dangerous looking on set pieces this year.
Mm-hmm.
Offensively, defensively, they've still shown some of the same weaknesses we've seen in the past
Well,
defending them. But that's something that you would hope with more time under Bruce Arena, with more time for Kessler to learn the professional game, that they get better at. But it's nice to see the Revolution be a lot better attacking set pieces.
And I think strangely, like having like a true center forward helps in that regard. Like I feel like the last time the Revs were like a better set piece team was when Kai Kamara was roaming around, because Kai Kamara just heads everything. Like it was amazing to see. Like, I don't think we deserved that goal, but Kai Kamara got his head on it, so it went into the goal. I think you're going to see Buxa get a few of those. But that first touch, that first touch across Calvo at the top of the box, that is filth. And then turning around and finishing on the one time into the side netting. That's not something I expected to be in Buxa's repertoire. Now that I know he has that shot in the proverbial golf bag, damn, is all I can say about that.
Well, I'm going to get off topic for a second here because we're going to get more Buchanan questions to get to. But my one comment on the opposite side of Buxa is a phenomenal finisher, and what we saw there was really promising. What I haven't seen as much of that I think I was hoping to see for him as far as how the Revolution offense is going to interact when Carles Heel is out there, is him being a guy that with his back to goal can kind of win the ball and have some hold up play, and maybe spring a guy like Gustavo Bo, who kind of envisioning a guy like Buxa winning the ball and sending it back to Bo to send a cracker into the net, or fantastic pass from, and that we haven't really seen so much of from Buxa, his ability to play with the back to the goal. Is that at all something that concerns you going forward, or is it just the reality is he's a guy who's better with his front to goal, and the Revolution offense can accommodate that?
I think a little bit of both. Let's add the whole, hey, we're not getting the ball to Buxa in great spots. That's with his back to goal, and that's that's facing goal. I don't think we're just not getting the ball to Buxa enough, period. I think you're going to see Buxa being able to do that. Remember how I said that balance between the lines and things, where you're not getting the ball to Buxa in great spots? A lot of that is you're probably getting the ball to Buxa facing goal when you need him to be back to goal and have support. And those are things that I think Gil in particular are going to really, really help with. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with what New England's doing right now, but when it all starts to click, you're going to see it click, I think, real quick. And you're going to see wingers running off each other and hold up play, and all those things are going to happen probably right around the same time Gil gets back into lineup, but maybe a couple weeks after. But we're going to add that to the long list of things of, hey, our target striker's having a problem getting the ball in the proper spot. Part of that is because you've got his partner playing, center attacking mid. And we haven't figured out the support structure around both of those two guys yet. Because half the support structure is playing 15 yards behind where he should be. But yeah, I think you're going to see more of that. That's another thing of the checklist of, hey, is Zahibo going forward, or is he the recycler guy, or is Pania going to switch wings? All those little types of questions are things that when they get answered, you're going to see the Revs creating and converting a lot more chances than they are now.
All right, back to the substitution questions.
Mm-hmm,
David
mm-hmm.
David Sibilian, pretty harsh on Tajon Buchanan, but he says Buchanan was sloppy when dribbling, losing possession several times in crucial moments. Besides pace, what is Tajon great at? And to add some context to his comment, Tajon was dispossessed or had 4 unsuccessful touches in his short period of time, which was good enough for second on the Revs in most unsuccessful touches, and also had one time dispossessed. So those aren't really great numbers for a guy that was only on the field for 11 minutes plus stoppage time. But is that comment too harsh? And what else does Tajon provide other than pace?
I mean, this is again, this is where I'm gonna mention. Making subs in the final 10 minutes, I think, is stupid. If you're just trying to close out a game and waste time, all of your subs should more or less be done by the 75th minute. And I'm a firm believer of this. Subbing any time after that doesn't do anything. It doesn't give the person coming onto the field enough time to get themselves involved into the game. And Tajon Buchanan, in particular, yes, he's got a lot of speed. You need to give him a few touches. You got to get him on the ball a little bit. We don't need these little dink and dunk passes. He's not a target winger. We need him, bombing forward and causing problems. If you want to use him as a target winger, you can. You're going to be disappointed. You want to use him as a problem maker. And to be fair, he, despite the limited minutes, has shown, hey, he can cause some problems, which is why you get him in the game before the 80th minute. So no, I don't think it's necessarily harsh. I think some of that harshness needs to be redirected to Bruce Arena to A, use all the subs, and B, use them a little earlier so that instead of chasing the game in just the final few minutes, maybe that little Revs flurry, maybe that starts 5 to 10 minutes beforehand and that pressure builds and you crack Chicago in the 85th instead of 3 minutes after stoppage time.
Yeah, agreed. And we've got 3 questions here related to Kellen Rowe that I think we could probably cover all at once. So I'll go through all of them. First one comes from Mike Kennedy, who asked, with Rennick's seeing time and Rowe out, what does that say about Rowe's? What does that say about Kellen Rowe's role this year? We talked about that one a little bit. The Randy LH asks, is it time to sit Diego and give Rowe a chance? What can we do to improve our abysmal finishing? And then C Money from Discord asks, should Rivera and Rowe start against Portland after Diego and Pania/Teal struggled today? What are your thoughts on whether or not Rowe should get more playing time and kind of those proposed substitutions of giving Rivera and Rowe time, or just Rowe time, or sitting Diego, or sitting one of the wingers for Rivera?
I mean, it would not have shocked me if you had taken off, if the third Revolution sub in the, I'll say 80th minute, assuming Brennick and Buchanan came on in the 70th, if the final sub of the day was Rowe for Diego, like, that's a perfectly fine sub. It should probably happen 5-10 minutes earlier, but I'm not going to beat that horse any more than I have. I think that Kellen Rowe should be getting absolutely more playing time than he has, which I think right now is nil in MLS minutes. But again, the question is what type of role do you want for Kellen Rowe? Is he strictly coming off the bench? Is he a utility spot starter? What matchup? One of the things when I say the Revolution should be tinkerers and should be creating mismatches, Kellen Rowe is one of the players who should be bringing off the bench to create one of those mismatches. I don't know what it is, whether it's marking someone, whether it's getting the ball into a certain spot, whether it's playing next to Heel as a more number 8 type player. Those are the types of maneuvers that you should be making instead of just like for like subs for your speedy box-to-box midfield types. You have those types of players on the bench. You're going to have a Luis Caicedo available off the bench, or a Zahibo, or a Rowe, or a Caldwell. You have these guys on the bench. You need to use them to create mismatches. And Rowe is one of those guys who should be on the field to force the other team to do something to react to the fact that, Kellen Rowe is there. And I think that when you make like-for-like subs, when you just throw on Buchanan and Rennick for the final 10 minutes, you don't force the other team, in this case Chicago, to change anything other than, hey, Buchanan's still really fast and he's got fresh legs. And I think, I think again, that's another element of I'm like, something's missing here, and it's not being changed. And the positioning and the formation and everything is just static. And when you're static and you don't change things around, and you don't force the other team to do something else, it's harder to break them down.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you just said. The only thing I'll add is going back to the first question on the list of questions about Kellen Rowe is Mike Kennedy's question. What does that say about Kellen Rowe's role this year that he hasn't gotten minutes and Justin Rennicks and Buchanan have, and I agree with what you're saying that you would think that these are games where especially when you're not using your third sub, you could bring him in for Diego Fagundes to kind of change the matchups and create chances. But the fact that he's not going in, and the fact that, frankly, he didn't play well last year for Salt Lake, he didn't play well last year for Kansas City after leaving the Revolution, and the fact that if you watch the preseason games, I don't think he played very well in the preseason for the Revolution. Makes you wonder if there's something wrong there. And this isn't the same Kellen Rowe that we saw from the Revolution 3 or 4 years ago, and that's a bit troubling. And the fact that, again, we haven't seen him at Bruce Arena obviously had confidence in him to bring him back to this team after not playing that well last season for other teams, and maybe that confidence so far hasn't really been warranted based on what Bruce Arena is seeing in training and based on what he saw in preseason. Because I agree with you, if he had been playing well, if this was the Kellen Rowe of 3 or 4 years ago, you would think that you would be seeing him make those substitutions and bring Rowan for Fagundes late in the game, or Rowan for somebody else, especially when they're not using that third sub.
Yeah.
But the next question kind of leads to the same thing. Revolution Report asks, does a team really have depth if after one injury, Rennicks and Buchanan are its attacking subs? And I think they mean one attacking injury because the Revolution have a lot more than one injury. And, my take on that one is, Rennicks and Buchanan, I think, are good players. They're young guys that have a lot to learn. And I think the role of 80th minute subs, if that's what they're going to be, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I do think there's reason to question the Revolution's depth again, because a guy like Kellen Rowe, a veteran who you'd expect to come on and help the offense, hasn't been playing. If he's not ready to help this team in that role, then maybe the Revolution don't have enough offensive depth.
Yeah, no, I think often we got to remember that when you look at your offensive depth, it's very similar to your defensive depth. In theory, you're one of your best left midfielders is playing left back. Maybe a solid right midfielder is playing right back. Your best right back is playing center back. Well, when we flip this around, one of your best utility midfielders is playing holding mid. One of your best off striker is playing attacking mid. So yes, this is why things go wrong, is because you've got everyone sort of not at their best positions. When you have, Carlos Hill back on the field, now you've got Bo back at a better position than he is. Maybe that frees up Diego or Rowe or Caicedo to be more of a number. Not here to talk about the past. I don't have a problem with Tajon Buchanan and Justin Rennicks getting minutes ever. They are both good players. I think they both have certain roles and are very, very good. I think Justin Rennicks would be another great off striker to work with Buxa, because he is a little bit more of a standard, I am not a number 9. I'm not a target man, but I am a striker. And I feel like, he's not the same playmaker that Bo might be, but he is that guy. I'm like, Justin Rennicks is going to pop up somewhere where he's absolutely supposed to be, and he's going to blast a pretty good shot into the goal. This is exactly what I thought he was going to do before he blasted that one into Rosie. But again, you have to be in the right spot to take the shot, to put it in Rosie, as opposed to being in the wrong spot and the chance never even occurs. So that's where I see Rennicks, where I'm like, yes, that's exactly what he's on the field to do, is to be in the right spot when that chance shows up. And Tajon Buchanan is who Tajon Buchanan is. He's pretty good attacker in his own right. So them getting minutes is not the issue. I think they should be getting more minutes than they already are. And being late subs or late cameo subs is not necessarily a bad thing. But you need an opportunity to be involved in the game. And if that one opportunity happens on your second or third touch, well, that just sometimes is unfortunate.
So the next question comes from Cameron Young, and I think we can go through this one quickly because it kind of ties in everything we've already talked about. He asks, has Bruce Arena caught Friedel-itis in the sense of bad subs, not using all three of them and making them late? And you commented on a lot of those points already, but is Friedel-itis a bit harsh?
No, Friedel-itis is a bit harsh because, again, part of it also is, and this was more of a knock on Friedel, was Bruce, I think, is trying to leave his best players out there to win the game. So holding off on the subs is something that I think is a little bit more, I don't want to say natural, but a little bit more standard for Bruce. It's like, I have the veteran guys, I'm going to run with them, and then I'm going to roll the dice with the younger guys, because the worst thing that happens is, well, it doesn't work and we tie the game. And I think that Bruce is balancing I don't want to lose the game. I don't want the young kids to lose me the game if they make a mistake or I have them in too long, or if I put them in for 10 minutes, it's probably long enough for them to do that one good thing. To be fair, he's been right on that second part. Obviously, the one good thing hasn't been converted. But I just think like if you're comfortable with them coming in the final 10 minutes, you should be comfortable with them coming in the final 20 minutes or the final 30 minutes. And that shouldn't change because they are younger players. Like, no, they're professionals. You see them every week. You know what they're capable of doing. Give them the opportunity to do that. If they're not doing that at the MLS level, then give them the opportunity to start in the USL level, because one of the reasons why maybe these guys aren't as well-rounded as we think they should be is because they aren't getting those game reps that everyone at Red Bulls is, or everyone at Orlando has been, or whatever the heck Dallas does to churn out 1,000 homegrowns every year. Things like I said, there's, knocking the Revolution for the first 2 games, like, yes, they deserve to be knocked. But remember, this is the best offseason ever in the history of the Revolution. I already wrote about this. It's not even debatable. This is the beginning of the long con. We don't need the team to be really, really good right now, although we'd like them to be. What we want them to be is really darn good 2 or 3 years from now, and they keep getting better.
All right, last 2 questions, then I got a couple comments that I don't think need responses. The first question is from Quite Revs, who asks, what changes would you make to the lineup? Are you sure it's not too early to talk about reinforcements because we've needed them all offseason and effectively ignored that position? I assume that's probably talking about central midfield.
I'm assuming solely midfield, yep.
Yep. And thoughts on playing the kids? Should we do this more or less of it? Which I think all kinds of ties into changes to the lineup.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, with if there were no restrictions on Garber bucks and international spots and salary cap and things, yes, of course, I think we need just one really great, awesome center midfielder. We didn't do that. We went out and we got a number 9 to pair with our kind of other striker and Carlos Gil. You know what? I'm fine. I can work with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with Wilfred Zahibo. There's nothing wrong with Luis Caicedo. There's nothing wrong with Scott Caldwell, Diego Fagundes, Kellen Rowe. All of those guys are good soccer players. Even Kellen Rowe, especially Kellen Rowe. We don't need to knocking Kellen Rowe on this show. I will not allow that such shenanigans. What we need is we need to figure out a way how to get that supporting cast, because now it's a supporting cast. Luis Caicedo we thought was going to be the guy. No, he's a member of the supporting cast. We need to get the supporting cast in a position to help the big stars and vice versa. And right now, that is not happening. There is an imbalance in the lineup. That imbalance will be somewhat corrected when Carlos Gil comes back. But more importantly, there just needs to be that tinkering, those little changes, that understanding of, hey, I know you're doing this. I need to be doing this. I need you to recognize to get into that space and take that over. And I need to put the ball into that space to get it to you. And I feel like those little things are not happening. And those little things would be happening regardless right now who's in the lineup, in particular with Gil out. There's no outstanding move that I would make right now that isn't, we need to get Gil back in the lineup. After we get Gil back in the lineup, then we can start going, okay, now what are the best spots for everyone on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think it's very hard to come up with too many personnel changes with the current options available. But, the one thing I would say is I do think the Revs desperately need reinforcements at the central midfield position. I think they should have gone in the offseason and somehow found a TAM signing to fit that role. I agree with exactly what you were saying, that these guys are kind of the supporting cast of the stars, but I think you need one of your central midfielders to be more than supporting cast.
Right.
I think that's kind of the problem. It's such a crucial role that I think the Revolution have a very, very good roster and a very good team that should certainly make the playoffs and compete for maybe a top half seed. But I think the one thing they're missing from being an actual contender to win a championship is a dominant central midfielder. And, like you said, Caicedo is a good player, Zahibo is a good player, Fagundes is a good player, Caldwell is a good player, Rowe's a good player. All these guys are good players, but none of them are great players. And I think they need to be paired with a great player for this Revolution team to be truly successful. It's not an easy position to find somebody for, but I think that's vital.
It goes back to when were the Revolution at their best? They were at their best in 2014 when they had the following. They had Charlie Davies up top. Is he a prototypical number 9? No, but Charlie Davies is a pretty darn good soccer player. You had Lee Wynn down the middle, right behind him, and you had Jermaine Jones right behind him. That spine was really, really good. Well, right now, your spine, or your 3 best players, I don't know where Bo fits in that mix. I really don't. And I don't, that's the imbalance is, Are we playing Gale as a number 10? Is he got two strikers in front of him? Is Bo out wide, kind of sort of roaming and causing trouble and creating those mismatches that we want? Is he creating those mismatches with Carlos Pinilla, with Christian Pinilla? Is he creating those mismatches with Teal Bunbury? I don't know yet because we haven't gotten them all out on the field. And I feel like we need to sort of answer the question of get everyone on the field first and then start figuring out the questions, or be prepared to make those adjustments very quickly once Hill gets back so that you can, punch through and not look like the team you are right now. Because again, the team you have right now is not bad. In order to miss big chances, you have to create big chances. The Revolution have never had a problem creating big chances. They now have a number 9, another striker, and a big time playmaker in the final third to convert all those big chances that they make. They've never had that before. They've never really had anything close to that before. So that's the other interesting dynamic with this team of now you're such a team that's so top heavy. How do you balance out the supporting cast in behind? And until we answer that question, when we get all three of the big DPs on the field, it's really unfair to talk about what to do at holding midfield until we fix and get everyone in the top half sorted out.
Yeah, and as far as actually making changes to this team, the only thing I would do potentially is what we talked about earlier, and that's kind of switch up Bunbury and Pinilla, because I don't think it's necessarily been that effective as inverted wingers and do that on a game-by-game basis. And as far as playing the kids, I don't think, I agree with you that, they should be coming off the bench sooner, but I'm not sure any of them have proven they're ready to start over those guys, even if they're not playing that well.
And the other thing is, like I said, if there were no restrictions on guard bucks or things like that, yes, you'd probably go out and get a big-time DP signing and holding mid. Well, you've already got 3 DPs, so now you got to figure out, can you get another TAM signing when you've already got 2 guys in Zahibo and Luis Caicedo, Caicedo 1. You've already got 2 TAM guys that are kind of sort of already there. So, how do you balance? You can't have 3 TAM guys at one position. That just seems a little weird. So I think it's one of those things, at some point you're just going to have to see that, the Revolution, if they retool a position where they go out and they do get one of those spots, you might have to see one of those guys get traded in order to open up that international spot or open up the salary cap space, to have someone on that roster in that position to be that partner for whether it's Caicedo, whether it's Scotty, whether it's Zahibo, whoever you want to keep. You might have to get rid of one of those guys to open up the spot or the roster or the salary cap space to get that additional signing into that holding midfield spot.
All right. And the last question comes from Powder Hungry, and I'll let you go first, but I have my own thoughts on this question. Would you rather see the Revs end like they did or play like crap and squeak out 3 points?
I mean, obviously you will always take 3 points, but I think that again, that final stretch, that's why those adjustments need to happen sooner, because that team is capable of, hey, let's switch on the afterburners and just run someone else into the ground for 20 minutes. And New England is a team that can absolutely do that, and they should have done it to Chicago. Credit to Chicago for sticking out and holding on to that point. In particular, Kenneth Conholm, again, that late goal, that late saving goal for Chicago, again, really, really key. Just as Knighton was key in the final stretch, like that game deserved to end 1-1 because the goalkeeper said so, and because the attacks were just, kind of average for the entire night. Obviously, yes, I'd love for the team to play well. Playing well does not always mean points. Playing well sometimes means losing. But at the very least, when you're playing well, that points will generally come. And right now, the Revolution have work to do.
Yeah, my problem with this question is I think it implies the Revolution played really well, and I don't think the Revolution did play really well. I think they played okay.
I think would it be unfair to say they played better against Montreal? Would it be unfair to say that?
I think you could make that case, especially because it's a road game.
At least from a shooting like shots on goal standpoint, like it seemed like we made Montreal work a lot more. But that game was weird because that turf sucked.
Yeah.
Or so I don't know. I want to say like this was, I don't think this was a great game by either team. I think either team could have won it. Either team could have lost it. I think a draw is completely fair. Would I have taken a draw in Montreal? Yes. Did I think the Revs played well enough to draw that game in Montreal? Yes. Is there a difference right now, 2 games in, having 1 point or 2 points? No.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think you always would rather see the Revolution squeak out 3 points and play like crap than, play decent as I'd say maybe they played this game, not great. On the other hand, if it was an early season game when the Revolution absolutely dominated and looked fantastic and only came away with 1 point, then maybe you'd say, hey, this was such a great performance and shows so well going forward that maybe it was better than 3 points. But I wouldn't argue that about either of the Revolution's performances so far. That 3 points would have been better even if they squeaked it out. And good teams find a way to grind out 3 points when they're missing a star like Carles Heel. Yep. So even a poor performance that saw 3 points would have been a good sign.
And particularly at home, again, dropping points at home is never a great thing.
And the last two comments I'll just read through quickly because I think we both agree with both of them. I don't need to comment on it. MJ says, fit Renix with a pair of goat horns. You can't miss those. I think we both agree that he can't miss those. And James Downing points out the obvious. Carles Heel is pretty core to the success of this team, huh? I think both of those comments are both things that we can agree on. And a couple other quick news things I wanted to mention before we wrapped up. The Revolution announced their all-time team during halftime of this game. And really quickly, Steve Nicol, the coach, obvious choice. Goalkeeper Matt Reese, obvious choice. Defenders, Andrew Farrell, Michael Parkhurst, Chris Tierney, probably a bit more controversial in some of the choices there. Midfielders, Clint Dempsey, Diego Fagundes, Shari Joseph, Lee Wynn, Steve Ralston. Forwards, Joe Max Moore, Taylor Twellman. Really quickly, anyone on there that you think shouldn't be on there and anyone on there that you think was a big snub to leave off?
I think if you're going to go with the focal point of the Steve Nicol 3-5-2, you must have Jay Heaps in that back line in the 3-5-2 over Andrew Farrell. I love Andrew Farrell, but the more that you harken back to the days of the Steve Nicol era when this team was arguably the second or third best franchise in the entire league for a decade. You want to be highlighting that as often as possible. I think Jeff Larentowicz deserves a shout on this team. Aside from that, I don't think there's a ton wrong with it. Obviously there's players like, is Jermaine Jones one of the best players ever to play for this team? Yes, absolutely. But he was only here for 18 months. Is one of the best seasons in Revolution history Jose Gonzalez in 2013? Yes, it was. Absolutely. Is that enough to be on the all-time team? No, probably not. I think the team is right. Or pretty darn close. Someone like Pat Noonan just misses out. Pat Noonan was a damn good striker, and we forget that because he played next to Taylor Twellman and Steve Ralston. Like those guys were good. But no, I don't think there's a lot to really mess with there. The Steve Nicol 3-5-2, that's the formation that you want. You've got your two holding midfielders. You've got your attackers. You've got your two strikers. There's a lot to like in that group, and where instead of an all-time history team, there needs to be something in Gillette Stadium, or dare I say downtown Boston, that might have all of those players, maybe rotunda to a stadium or entranceway or Hall of Fame, or I don't know, something, Ring of Honor, all these things that it should exist and still yet do not.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, so I'm not going to harp on it too much, but to me, the big snub is Jay Heaps. I mean, Jay Heaps was one of the all-time leaders in appearances for this team. He helped lead the team to 4 MLS Cup finals. He led them to 2 U.S. Open Cups, including a win. He led them to a Superliga.
Let's also not forget, second best head coach in team history. Let's not even debate.
Yeah,
correct? That's not a debate. It's a short list of good coaches in this
right.
Arena might be third for crying out loud already.
He might be. The competition is pretty slim after Steve Nicol, but to me that's a big snub. And again, no knock on Andrew Farrell. I think he's a good player, and by the end of his career, maybe there will be a case for him over Jay Heaps. I just can't make the case right now. You talk about longevity issues, guys like Jermaine Jones, Francis Okura, even Carlos Shimosa, players that talent-wise, probably belong over in Andrew Farrell or Chris Tierney or, Diego Fagundes. But then you factor in longevity and it's harder to make the case. But then you do have the exceptions where, Clint Dempsey was only on the team for 3 years, but he was such a good player that you have to find a way to put him on there.
You could easily put Clint Dempsey there, but Clint Dempsey was on a couple of those MLS Cup run teams and things like that. He missed all the silverware part, but there's a reason why
there's more logic
why the Revolution were jump-started into getting there. And Dempsey was a big part of that. No, I think Chris Tierney, listen, Chris Tierney's the left back. Obviously, if you're only doing 3 defenders, is he one of the 3 best defenders ever?
I don't know.
Maybe not. But is he the left back? I'm willing to say yes. Yes, he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jay Heaps would be on that team over Chris Tierney too, if we're making that argument.
Right. I think, again, if you're ranking, how are we only putting 3 defenders on? Who are the 3 best defenders? Tierney's probably right there at 4th or 5th. But you're telling me, like, is he the best? Is he the best left back ever, or the most important left back ever? I could go with that. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think there's a strong case that Joe Franchino, who captained the team to all
Yeah,
those MLS Cup appearances at
you
left
could. Yeah,
back,
absolutely.
is in that conversation. And Ted
Hmm.
Chronopoulos, who was a fantastic player in the early years, is in
Again,
that
yeah,
conversation.
there's a handful of guys that those early 2002, 2003 guys, like a lot of those guys. There's a reason why that Revs team was so darn good for so long. Chronopoulos and Franchino in that back line were another reasons why. It also helps you got Shelby Joseph cleaning up everything in front of you, but that's not the point. We already knew Shelby was going to be on that list, and he's never. I don't think Shelby's ever going to come off that list, as far as I'm concerned. And
No
probably
way.
neither is Twellman. Probably neither is maybe Joe Max. You have to do a lot to get past Joe Max, and because if you're going to bump Joe Max, you also got to get past Noonan, and I could argue I could put Noonan up there too. But yeah, like I said, there's a good. I would almost argue like I'd rather make like the Revs best like 23 man like Olympic or international roster,
Right.
because that'd be a way more fun exercise, because then you could go too deep at every position. And then you can throw in guys like Shuttleworth or even Matt Turner now at this point at goalkeeper, Aiden Brown, all those guys are going to be like, hey, how good of an exercise is that? Like the one best team, a lot more debate because it's a little bit more controversial, but about 8 or 9 of those guys, like, no, those are the starters. And you got to really do a lot of work in your career to bump off. Even someone like Lee Wynn now is probably going to be there for a while. Unless Carlos Gil just goes off the rails the next 5 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's possible, too, that Diego Fagundes gets bumped off. I think Fagundes would get bumped off before Lee Wynn at this point. So another couple quick points. What did you think of the new home jerseys that made their debut?
Listen, I own the crayon stripe jersey. It's a glorious jersey. The crayon stripe is amazing. It resembles the crayon flag, which is the greatest logo in all of MLS soccer and should never be changed under any circumstance. I like the throwback. I like the red shorts. I like everything. I hope we go back next year to the white shorts and the navy, but I really like this. I like a lot of the kits that I've seen this year. I think DC also has the red shorts. I like it. There's something about it. It just works. The league did really well on these. We're gonna make fun of the Adidas stripes. But I really like what the league did overall with these. I know we're gonna make fun of them a little bit. But there's a lot of really good team looks that this year. Yes, everyone looks the same, but it's still like there's a different contrast than we haven't seen in a handful of years, and I enjoyed that for the Revs in particular with the homage to the '96 team.
Yeah, there are a few MLS jerseys this year that I don't think were home runs, but we can save that for another time.
Mm-hmm.
My only comment on the Revs jersey, my only negative comment on the Revs jersey is I do think the sponsor United Healthcare logo is the biggest and most prominent of any MLS team this year. And if I'm standing 25 feet away from somebody wearing a Revolution jersey, I'm going to think it's a United Healthcare advertisement. That's my one negative on that jersey. But otherwise I mostly agree with you, and I do think it looks better with the red shorts than it does by itself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my thoughts on that one. One more thing I want to talk about is the news about Victor Wanyama, who was apparently on the Revolution's discovery list, got signed by the Montreal Impact, and the Revolution somehow got $150K for him. The rules in the past have said, you get $50K for somebody, and so I'm a little bit confused by exactly how that worked out, and I don't think anyone's provided a great explanation. But what are your thoughts on that one? We just talked about how the Revolution needed a great defensive midfielder, or central midfielder.
Right.
It doesn't seem likely that Wanyama, given they used 3 DPs, was really an option.
No, he wasn't an option, but the fact that might have been on the table, and again, it goes back to, could you have operated with Bo as the number 9 and had Wanyama as the number 6 next to one of your other center midfield types? That'd have been interesting. Do I necessarily think that Wanyama on turf is a great idea right now? No. Do I think Wanyama on Olympic Stadium turf in Montreal is a great idea right now? No, absolutely not. My only thought on the 150K part would be when the Revolution had Sebastian Lletget and sold him his rights to LA Galaxy and really annoyed Bruce Arena in the process. I want to say that mechanism of forcing the 50,000 allocation was when you had the player on your list and you weren't going to do anything with him. It seemed like Montreal and New England were very much like, we want him, what do you want for him kind of question. So that's why the 150K came into play. If this is the last parting gift of Brad Friedel's Tottenham / international, but mostly Tottenham connections, it's not a bad parting gift, 150K in Garber bucks. The Revs might be able to do something with that in the summer.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said. And I completely agree with you with your points about Wanyama on turf. As a Spurs fan, for those that listen to the podcast know, Wanyama's been a pretty big disappointment for Spurs over the past couple seasons. He's struggled mightily with knee injuries. And he really, when he has played, he hasn't looked like the same player he was before he came to Spurs. He's only 28 years old, so he's not an old player, but I would be very concerned with a guy that's had the history of knee injuries he has playing on turf. And we know the Revolution have a history of signing guys with knee injury histories, and it hasn't really worked out well.
We have our own issues with or signing guys who then develop knee injuries before they come to the roster. Yes. Apologies to Mr. Kouassi. I thought Xavier Kouassi might have been that DP type player who could have helped us out, or that high TAM player who could have been that number 6. No, when Yama, again, you're right. When he plays, has he been the effective, awesome number 6 that you wanted him to in Tottenham? No. Tottenham is not in MLS. MLS is a little bit of a different thing. Someone at his age with his skill set could come in and do a lot of very good things. And Montreal is,
if he's healthy.
But again, Montreal right now is already a team that seems to me like they're already a little bit of a crafty bunch. And if Thierry Henry isn't a terrible head coach, that Montreal team could be a problem. And we'll just have to see how much of a problem in the East, because now, speaking of bad injury news, Atlanta United has some problems, and they might not be the elite team that we think they are.
Right. I think the Eastern Conference with Joseph Martinez likely out for the season is kind of up for grabs.
I think it's NYCFU's division to lose at this point. But yeah, I mean, could a team like Toronto or a crafty team like Montreal, could they get up into that area? Absolutely. What I'm still waiting to see is speaking of which, NYCFC still own 2. That's very interesting. I'm waiting to see where the middle of the East sort of pans out, where New England falls in that, because that's going to be a big thing. I really think the Crew got better, and that's another team to look out for. As the top of the East is now all Atlanta, and then everyone on 4 points, and then everyone else who's not very good. The East was always going to be a little bit weird this year as far as where the middle would pan out. And now that Atlanta might significantly drop back to the pack, it just makes things more interesting, because now you sort of stretch out the very good teams and you have fewer great teams at the top that you have to chase down. So that might be very interesting how that plays out long term.
And before we wrap things up, the Revolution have a game on Sunday coming up against the Portland Timbers. The Timbers lost their season opener, but as we record right now, we're up 1-0 on Nashville for late in the game for potentially their first win of the year. Any final thoughts on that game, or anything else you want to discuss before we wrap things up?
No, there's a big. So apparently there's been a schedule change, and Seattle is now coming to bother us at home a lot sooner than they were supposed to.
Right.
So that's going to open up, if I recall, some kind of a 5 home games and 6 stretch that, like, the entire now April is almost at home or something like that.
Yeah, I know they play at home against Portland this weekend, and then they go away to Salt Lake, and then they have a bye week, and then they're back, and they have Saturday, April 4th, home against Colorado, Wednesday, April 8th, home against Seattle, Saturday, April 11th, home against Cincinnati, on the road against the Rebels, and back home for April 25th against Montreal. So they have 6 games in April, because they have another midweek game after that at Toronto.
At Toronto.
But 4 of those 6 are at home, and then they're back home again to face New York City FC.
You've got a stretch of 5 of 7 at home. That was the math I was trying to do in my head. So 5 of 7 at home by the end of, more or less by the end of April. We're going to find out very quickly if New England is going to be a contender, because if they're still like mid-table in the East after a whole bunch of home games in April, that does not bode well for us. I know that the Revolution have been a much better team on the road under Bruce Arena, and a much harder team to beat in general under Bruce Arena. But I mean, we gotta go through that stretch. I'm assuming, let's assume that maybe we tie Real Salt Lake. God, if you don't have at least 4 wins out of that stretch, or 5 wins out of that stretch, that's not great.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Being without Carles Heel early and having all these home games, you got to find a way to get 3 points in those games, or you're going to dig yourself into a deep hole. There are, maybe the top of the East isn't as good as it was before with Joseph Martinez out for Atlanta, but there's still a lot of good teams in the East that you pointed out. And if you dig yourself into a hole early, you're not going to be fighting for a home playoff game. You're going to be fighting for bottom half of the playoffs.
Right. No, I mean, like,
difference.
Look at last year. What was the hole? I mean, we dug ourselves, it was a 13-point hole by the end of April?
Something like that,
Something like that, yeah. And I mean, like, that took us 3.5 months to dig out of, and then it took us a month to clinch a playoff spot. So yeah, we've already done that. We did that last year. I don't want to repeat last year. Last year hurt too much. I'd much rather be, listen, if we're just going to be like the 4th or 5th seed pretty much the entire year, that's perfectly fine. But I do want to see the Revolution at some point take a significant step forward. I don't know what that step is in the standings or how big that step is. But certainly, like, should they be 5, 6, 9 points better than they were last year? I would certainly hope so. But 9 points better last year puts them well into a home playoff game. 5 points puts them near a home playoff game based on last year's standings. And if a team like Atlanta is going to drop back, or a team like New York is going to do whatever they're doing the first 2 games, it does make the conference very interesting.
All right. And before we wrap things up, where can people find your writing, and give us your Twitter handle?
Oh, God, writing. I remember. Yes, I do that. I am at jcatanese43. I write at thebentmusket.com. You can find us all over. We're trying to regroup here beginning of the year. My work is not kind, staying up all night and then trying to sleep during the day and write.
I know the feeling.
And it's yeah, this is not a good habit to get into, kids. But overnight pay is very, very good. I love my paycheck. But no, aside from that, no, it's a very it's something that we're hoping to get a little bit more into now that the Rev season is underway. A little bit more commentary, some positive and negatives from the first 2 weeks that we talked about here, including, again, there's nothing wrong with playing your kids. Playing your kids is good. Play your kids more, in fact, instead of just the final 10 minutes, Bruce. We like the kids. We want them to miss the sitter and then 5 minutes later come back and hit the winner because they have enough time to do that.
Well, thanks again, Jake, for joining us. You can follow me at Sean Donahue. You can follow Revolution Recap at Revolution Recap on Twitter, and you can also like our Revolution Recap page on Facebook. Please leave us a review if you liked our show, and if you didn't like our show, you can send us a DM instead. And thanks again to everybody for listening. We appreciate your feedback and all the great questions again this week.
I thought all the hate mail went to Connecticut. I thought I got all the hate mail.